Good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome to another Webinar Wednesday hosted by Cal State Bakersfield Small Business Development Center. Good afternoon. My name is Kelly Bearden. I am your host for today and also your moderator. And got a great program coming up. Got a little bit of disaster stuff to go in front of that. A lot of other current information. And then we're going to get on with this fine program to talk about as far as doing our part to solve the child care crisis that's going on in America. Well, today is spring break for many. I know CSU Bakersfield, our students are just enjoying spring break. I think every last one of them. So I know others are doing spring break. Others had it during other times. So it's spring break today. So all those breakers out there, I hope you're having a good time. Today, we're going to talk a lot about the disaster loan focus, and particularly on federal programs with the newest release Monday night of a new disaster, SBA disaster from the storms basically in March. We'll talk about that in a second. We'll talk about also on Capital Quarter a little bit about maybe leveraging grants to get more capital as we look for ways to start our businesses and our startup businesses. There's a way to leverage and actually get more capital as far as debt, a small business loan, or other ways and other programs. And we're going to continue to look for those programs to help our new child care and other businesses. Economic Corner today, just quick look at the job scene that's going on. Today, if you're on for I hope you're on for the child care business programs. There are some outstanding programs to really meet an acute problem that's not only here in the San Joaquin Valley or in the Eastern Sierra or potentially the Sierra Coast, but also even beyond Kern County, California. And it's a nationwide problem as far as the acute child care shortage that we have of providers. So hopefully you are here for that. We'll look at some of the key pandemic programs, relief programs that are still available. And for your news and information, you are in the right spot. Live every Wednesday. It's Webinar Wednesday. And as always, we'll take your questions. So today we'll be loading up a lot of our resources from today that we talk about a lot of different sites that you can go to, snatch those out of the chat. Our producer, Maureen Busher-Dang, will be putting those into the chat box for you. And use the Q&A box for asking any questions on any of the programs we talk about today. We will get to those before the end, and also a poll. And a very simple poll today, got a lot to talk about, got to go with a quick poll. And our first poll question is going to be, according to published reports, what percentage of Americans typically do not have a single cash transaction in a given week? Is it 10% of Americans that don't do anything with cash? Is it 20, 40, or 80%? So published reports, I believe this was from Pew Research, and they listed the number of Americans that said they do not have a single cash transaction in a given week. Is that 10%, 40%, or 80% of Americans? We got 64% of you participating. Thank you for jumping in and answering our very first poll question. You've got a couple of moments to jump in because we're going to end this poll and share the results with you. And our first poll, well, 40% of you. How about that? 40% of you selected 40%. And you're 100% correct if you selected 40%. 40% of Americans do not have a single cash transaction in any given week. 30% of you thought 20, and another 20% on the 80-20 rule that is so common in my neck of the woods, right? 80-20, it's going to be somewhere in a poll question, and oftentimes it's the answer, but not this time. So thank you for that first one. 40% of Americans don't have a cash transaction in any given week. So we will go to our second poll question, and we will launch it. And it comes down to, how much does the average American carry as far as cash? Is it $20? Is it $67? Or is it $80? So the average American, do they carry $20, $67, or $80 on them at any given time? I think in some of the published reports I saw, the optimum number really should be, we should be carrying around around $30 or $35. But Americans surveyed $20, $67, or $80. Okay, looking for one more participant in here. There you go. 68% of you responding. We're going to close this particular poll and share the results with you. And as you see, 64% of you think $20. And that would have probably been my guess, but this time it's not correct. $80 is not correct. It's the 18% of you that guess $67 is the average cash typically carried by an American at any given time. Okay, thought that was interesting. We go with something turning out of that cashless society, and away we go. So let's go with a few of the local programs as far as what are open now. We'll be talking about a few of those. The first round of storms that were December, January, and we do basically have 2 rounds of storms that we're talking about some relief damage. That was at FEMA for many of the principal counties is closed. And that first round of storms that was kind of from December 27th to January 31st, economic injury is still open if you were injured in that. The March storms, the March 23 storms, specifically storm that you could have had damage anytime during March, was really 4 specific days. We had 7 counties that were declared on Monday. We'll talk a bit about that. Our Kern County micro grant program up to $2,500 is ending soon, but there's still time. If you had a small micro business, let's say you had a small child care business at home, and you didn't receive the California Relief Grant, and you were in business in 2019, you could get $2,500, but a limited time is available for that. We're going to be talking in the next week or two about the new City of Bakersfield Entrepreneurship Program. Tentatively, we'll probably get into that in some really big detail 2 weeks from today. And it might even have a way to where we can actually talk about some of the programs we're talking about today and work in partnership with. So there's a little tease for you. We're hoping our California Dream Fund comes back for 2.0. We should know by the first part of June if that's going to happen. And there's still a lot of loans for underserved venture capital groups and others. And the employee retention credit is still open as well. So those are some of the programs that are open. Our Capital Corridor, a weekly feature here on Webinar Wednesday, is going to talk about the federal storm disaster update. So the FEMA for physical damage, the FEMA, which, oftentimes when there's a federal emergency that's declared, there's either 2 routes that it can go. It can be both FEMA and SBA, or it can be SBA only. And FEMA is for your tornadoes that took out and really did some major damage in Little Rock, Arkansas. That will be a FEMA assistance webinar or disaster. And I'm sure there's going to be webinars on that. But for this one, most likely it's going to remain an SBA assistance, which will have physical damage for both homeowners and businesses that receive damage in a variety of different ways. It could have been by flood, by mudslide, by landslides, by a thing called straight wind, straight edge wind, straight something wind, straight line wind. Yes, thank you. And this declaration came out just on Monday night. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but that is open now. Kern is one of the 7 counties. As you see, also, we'll be talking a little bit about quickly on USDA assistance and the fact that IRS has paused deadlines. So last week we had mentioned that the governor had requested 9 counties in California be considered for a presidential major disaster declaration. Of those, 7 counties were actually in that declaration that came out on Monday night. Unfortunately, Calaveras County and Los Angeles counties were not on there that the governor had asked for California, but the other counties, including Kern and Tulare, Tuolumne, San Benedito, Monterey, and Mariposa, all in the Central California region, with the exception of Santa Cruz, but it's still in Central California, so we'll show some love. So really a good part of the Central California region is included in this disaster declaration. So the declaration that covers the 7 counties, those are primary counties. And you can have both physical damage that can be from your business or your residence by, like we said, flooding, landslide, mudslide, wind, and other issues, straight line wind, and also winter storms. So it could have also been from snow or other impacts from the severe winter storms. So the SBA is now coming into the region to try to help us. And since I didn't know what a straight line wind was and couldn't even remember it a while ago, but it's typically a wind that are associated with thunderstorms and have no rotation. So unlike a tornado, and that downburst causes wind damage from a thunderstorm. And they can actually reach over 100 miles an hour. So, you know, when a thunderstorm rolls in and you get a large amount of wind with that, that is a straight line wind. You know, I took a semester of meteorology and didn't even learn that. We're encouraging everybody to report damage if you're in the Eastern Sierra or San Joaquin, Southern San Joaquin Valley. Here are some counties to where you can go report to. In Inyo County, these are a lot of surveys, and this is really important. So if you do have damage, either physical damage or one of the wind damages, or basically physical property damage, you're going to want to go and fill out a form, because I think a lot of this damage is being underreported, and that could actually cause the disaster declaration to be underrepresented or underreported as well. So it could spread to other counties as well. We know that in talking last week that Mono County has had a significant amount of damage. And maybe if you get on and complete that survey, also in Inyo, Kern, Kings, or Tulare, you can actually bring a declaration to your county, because we have 7 counties now, but it can be added on. Once disaster is kind of revealed in other areas, it can be included into that declaration later on. So report the damage where you can. We mentioned last week that the USDA in rural areas has a new program that they released out in March, a couple of weeks back. And they were talking about certain Central California communities, such as Planada in Merced County, Pajara in Monterey County, and our very own Allensworth in Southern Tulare County. So those are 3 of the areas where they talked about where they could help people with to receive grants up to $40,675 in a variety of different areas. So here are the ones that USDA, only Inyo that we have in our 3 county area, but also Tulare is listed, not Kings though. So as far as the Southern San Joaquin goes, Stanislaus, a few others in the San Joaquin Valley. So what you want to do is you want to either contact USDA on their website, or you want to call Stephen at 530-792-580, and there's a digit missing. We'll have that in the actual chat today, the correct digit. So it happens when you sometimes cut and paste off of a press release. My apologies. So IRS has updated their disaster relief for individual and businesses in California, and includes a number of counties. In your chat, you're going to find the link to go there and get the very latest. Also from the California Franchise Tax Board, you can find the latest on that. We recommend that you talk to your tax professional or whoever does your taxes for you. Who knows, maybe it's your brother-in-law. And ask them and get guidance on what is available as far as relief from taxes that are either due or your filings are due. So there's a little bit more on the weather effects that came into here. In the interest of time, we'll skip that. Kern County Micro Grant Program, talked a little bit about that, up to $2,500. You can contact the SBDC here, 661-654-2856. Also, you can go to YouTube and find out about these webinars that happen. And this webinar will be on our YouTube channel, which is CSU SBDC. Of course, that stands for the California State University Bakersfield Small Business Development Center. And you can find any of those, including this one. In our toolbox, we have a lot of tools that we can help you in your business as far as live planning and demographics information, assistance with cash flow, the YouTube page we just mentioned, our transition plan from the Claytons. And last week I did mention Pop's ham recipe because last week, you remember, was National Mom and Pop Business. And, you know, Papa, he was a restaurateur for over 50 years, had the best ham recipe ever. It'll be on my dinner table this coming Easter Sunday. It takes a whole ham, 20-pound ham. If you're feeding a crowd, you want the recipe, send me an email at kbearden@csub.edu, and I will share for a very limited time, because you see in the toolbox right down here, Pop's Ham's recipe. It's a 20-pound ham, complete with the base. I think it's the best ham going. So on our economic corner, we're going to just focus today on the childcare concerns of workers that are looking for childcare help, and how we hope to help them today by enabling entrepreneurs to start and grow daycare businesses, daycare child care businesses. So we'll have just more on that in just a little bit. Our community gatherings next week, in the next 2 weeks, on the 12th and the 19th, a friend of the webinar program, a friend of Webinar Wednesday, Melissa Forziat, who's presented here a few times, has 2 free webinars. So why should we bring her in if she's going to warm us up? From 11 to 12 next Wednesday, and the following Wednesday, one on social media and smart principles of marketing. And again, that's 11 to 12. The links are going to be in the chat. But if you recall, outstanding presenter, great topic. And so marketing free of charge here with Melissa for the next 2 weeks. Good warm up for Webinar Wednesday the next 2 weeks. The Bakersfield Women's Business Conference is coming, and it'll be here in just a couple of weeks. So you can get your tickets for a variety of places for the April 27th event. The Kern County Economic Summit, likewise, coming soon to a TV near you on May 13th. And that brings us to our special guest today. And our special guest is Jennifer Brooks, who is the founder and CEO of Nurture. She brings 25 years experience, as you can read, in microenterprise. So starting those very small businesses, in asset building, childcare, financial security, as I mix it around, in a variety of nonprofit and government settings and geographies. She is passionate about women's economic self-determination and committed to equality building and scaling practical solutions to make jobs in the care economy path to financial security. Jennifer, it's great to have you. I so look forward to this program today, and also a partnership that I think we're going to have for years to come. Thank you for being here. Take it away.
Thank you, Kelly. Let me share my screen. How does that look? Good?
Looks great.
Thanks. So yes, as Kelly said, my name is Jennifer Brooks, and I'm the founder and CEO of Nurture. Before we get going a little bit, let me just see if I can advance the screen. Excuse my technical difficulties. Let's see, there we go. So Nurture's vision is really that we have a double bottom line, which is to both improve job quality for folks who are in the care economy, particularly in childcare, and also to meet the needs of communities. And so what that means is, I think we all learned during the pandemic about just how vital childcare is to a functioning economy. We usually think about it in terms of parents' ability to go to work, or we think about it in terms of the long-term economic benefit to children of being in high-quality settings. But what Nurture really wants to lift up is not only the importance of those two things for parents and for kids, but also that caregivers' economic security is just as important. So what's the problem that we're trying to solve? It's really, at the end of the day, that childcare is an example of a market failure. So what that means is that most parents aren't able to pay what it actually costs to provide quality care. So the result is that if you are a middle or high income family, you can get that licensed quality care for your child. But if you are a low or moderate income family, your child's probably going to be in a more informal setting, which oftentimes equals less quality. And pinched in the middle there are the caregivers themselves, who, when you adjust for the cost of living, earn just over about $10 an hour in California. So how can we solve this market failure? Our answer is to support the development of home-based childcare businesses. And so why are we going to do that? Why should we focus on that part of the sector? There's really two reasons. The first is on the supply side. So this is generally the Central California region that we're looking at here, and we're looking at the supply of childcare. And so any dot that's orange means that there is one or fewer spaces for every 3 kids. So not enough licensed care. And if you look at the map, it is only in the little spaces that have blue dots in them that there's enough care. So across the Central California, we're really facing a childcare desert. And what we know, though, is that shortage is not equally divided across kids 0 to 12. There is much more supply of preschool, for example. The greatest shortage of care is for kids 0 to 2. And so why is that? So that is because that ratios that are set by the state licensing department say that you've got to have many more adults per little baby than you do for the older kids, which makes perfect sense from a health and safety and development standpoint. But what it means is that that centers, it doesn't make a whole lot of economic sense for them to have big classrooms full of infants and toddlers. And on the other side, there's parents and their desire to oftentimes have their little babies in a more home-like setting. So the kids are in these childcare homes or in home-based settings, right? And so by focusing on childcare entrepreneurs in home-based settings, we're able to take the biggest bite out of the gap in licensed childcare. And the second reason is that unlike the rest of the care economy, or most of the rest of the care economy, there is an opportunity for the women who run these businesses, and sometimes they're men and sometimes they're families, but by and large, they're women, for them to actually earn a family sustaining income. If childcare entrepreneurship done right, and I'll explain what that means in a minute, can actually earn somewhere around $45,000 to $55,000 a year in Central California. So what I mean by childcare done right is that you are fully enrolled all year long. If you've got a part-time kid using part of a space, the rest of the time there's another kid filling that space. You're collecting every dollar that's owed to you, and you're setting rates that actually cover the cost of your care. Problem is, not many people know how to do that. So we're focusing on, just to wrap up this piece, focusing on home-based childcare because it is this kind of virtuous circle where we're building economic security for caregivers. We're enabling parents to work and support their families financially. The caregivers are licensed and providing quality care, which prepares young children to succeed in school, which has a whole lifetime of positive health and wealth benefits. And research shows that it even has positive impacts for parents and grandparents when kids take advantage of quality care. So Nurture is really designed to be a solution that matches the scale of the problem that we're facing in California. Our guiding beliefs are that we can tackle this challenge if we do a few things. The first is that we equitably design our services with diverse childcare entrepreneurs. So we know who our target market is. They are folks who are farthest from economic opportunity. They may have limited English proficiency. They may not have a whole lot of formal education. They may not even have legal work authorization. That's our target market. And if we design for and with them, and the program works for them, it'll work for people who have fewer disadvantages to economic opportunity. The second principle is around harnessing the power of technology. So across California, and probably this is true across much of the country, the expertise around how do you prepare someone to run a successful childcare specific business kind of doesn't exist. And so what we're trying to do is use technology to deliver that very specific content in a way that we are able to do this at scale. And then the third principle is really around harnessing and building on the strength of community relationships. Nurture is a tool that's designed to be in communities and work with programs that already exist, so that we can build on that trust that exists and we can reach that audience that we want to get to. So we call Nurture a business support system. Yes, it is training, but unlike workforce training, for example, if you're teaching a phlebotomist how to draw blood again and again, when you're teaching somebody to run a business, you're really helping them make decisions about what their business will look like. And so we do that, and we also demystify the process. Whenever you're working in a sector that is highly regulated, it's kind of bureaucratic. I say kind of, it's really bureaucratic. And so helping people through the licensing process, for example, is a big part of what we do. In addition to the information that we're sharing, we also have some tools and insights. So there's a tool to build a budget. There's a tool to build a parent contract, we give you the tools to build a website, and insights around where your customers might be and even on your profitability. And then we've got some business services. So Nurture is overall designed to empower the entrepreneur to get stuff done herself. But in some cases, a little help from outside is what's needed, and we want to make those services available at a reasonable price. So what is it like to grow with Nurture? First piece of it is self-paced learning. I'll go into each of these in a minute. The second is group support. And the third is one-on-one responsive coaching. So the self-paced learning component, so each week learners are given an assignment and they go on a learning pathway. And on that pathway, they watch videos, they explore resources, they stop and pause and reflect on what their business will be like. Then they apply what they've just learned, discovered, decided through some interactive tools. And what comes back to them is a piece of their business plan. So their decisions, their commitments come back to them in an email where they've got it, so that they can say, okay, here's my startup budget, here's my marketing plan, here's what makes my business unique. And they've done that with just from their smartphone, excuse me. Then we have weekly 1-hour Zoom meetings to anchor the content. So we are introducing content for the next week. We're reflecting on the prior week's content as well. And people are learning from each other, forming relationships. Oftentimes they'll decide to set up a chat, or by a text group chat, where they're connecting to each other and continuing to support each other long after they're done with the program. And finally, the third piece is flexible, responsive, one-on-one coaching and support. So this is available by text, it's available by phone, it's available by Zoom. It's not a 9 to 5 kind of thing. If somebody needs help at 10 o'clock at night, it's very likely that they will get that text will get read, might not get responded to at 10 o'clock at night, but it will be first thing in the morning, weekends, etc. When people are actually doing the work and when they need the help to get themselves unstuck. All of Nurture's content is divided into courses. And we do this because we recognize that it's a lot to start a business. It's a lot to be successful. And number one, you can't take all that information in at once, but number two, you don't need it all at once. So we break things down into courses so that the information that we're providing is highly salient. And once you've mastered that piece and you move on, you get the next piece of content. What we're offering today and talking about is a track. A track is a combination of courses that are designed to be taken together. And this course, the Business Startup Track, is what we're offering. It has 3 courses: Business Exploration, which is kind of I would call it a mini course that essentially folks do before they're formally introduced into the program. The second is Accelerated State Licensing, and the third is Business Essentials. So what we're offering today is this course, or this track, excuse me. It's a 12-week commitment. We're able to make $1,000 startup grants to the participants who graduate and get their license. And new cohorts are starting very soon. April 17th is our objective, to have English cohorts and Spanish cohorts. And I'll just end here with some tiny URL links and a QR codes for the English and Spanish pre-application, and would invite all of you to share it with entrepreneurs or potential entrepreneurs who might be interested in this. And that's all I've got, Kelly.
Well, that's quite a bit, I got to say. Wow, this is such a great opportunity, and it comes at such a great time. I'm really looking forward to doing more and working with you. A couple things. What is the training like as far as it's self-paced on the phone, but you meet weekly? So what would a typical week be like on the phone? What would I be doing?
Sure. So you'd meet, let's say your cohort is meeting on Monday nights at 6 o'clock. So you'd meet with your cohort, you'd reflect on the work that you did the prior week. People would go around and, we have some prompting questions that get things going, some sharing happening. And then we usually watch the first video together to find out what people already know about the topic and start there. And then we make sure it's really clear what they need to do. And every week they do a different learning pathway. And some pathways are 10 steps long. A couple of them are like 4 steps long. So it kind of varies what the assignment is, but each step is a little bit of content that is leading you, giving you the breadcrumbs to keep going along that trail. And you could watch it, you could do the whole thing at once. You could do it in little pieces. You could do it while you're, waiting to pick up your kid at school. You could watch a video. They're designed to be taken in order. You have to do them in the order that they're prescribed. However, you can always go back and do the content again. So you watch videos. There are explorers where you go in and you take a look at, thanks for doing that. Go in and take a look at some resources. There are hyperlinks to external resources as well. So we're really working to kind of take what exists out there and pull it together in a way that an entrepreneur can use the information. And then they'll fill out, they'll respond to some questions, or they'll fill in a budget, for example, and then they'll get that back, and then they get a prize. So a big piece of our approach is the gamification of the learning experience. So as they complete steps along the pathway, they achieve milestones, and they get a little goodie for that. And then once the coach has kind of looked at their work on the back end and made sure that everything looks right, then she'll award a badge. And these are badges that you might want to share on your website, even to say, like, to show parents that you've done this work and you know what you're talking about.
Well, I just see our first question come in, and is there a cost for the 12-week training program?
No, there is no cost. Of course, there is a cost. Someone has to pay, right? But there is no cost to the entrepreneurs themselves. What we're offering right now is actually funded by the state through the Central California SBDC network. And we have spaces for, I would say, about 35 entrepreneurs in this footprint. If they are outside of the footprint, then we'll find some other way to pay for it. But we've got the funding for the training, and the startup grants that we're offering right now are coming directly from Nurture. But our intention is to, wherever possible, use government funding in order to have that be the first source of the funding. And then if no funding is available for a particular geography or at a particular time, then Nurture will step in with a startup grant.
Well, Jennifer, I don't get excited over a lot of programs, but you've got one that's got me really excited. It is such a win-win for so many different people. It's a win-win for the entrepreneur, where they really get that business set, they get that skill set going into business, and being able to make that very, very decent wage as an entrepreneur, $45,000 to $55,000 a year. And then you get the parent who is in a really, I think, I was a parent once or twice or 3 times. And really, a newborn, 0 to 2 years old, you really want them in that home setting. You want them in that setting away from the wild scene of everything. And it's such a great building tool that we talk about at the SBDC anyway, because you're building a business out of your home, and you might have, I would guess, probably up to 6 children. But there's always that possibility when you do your business right, then you build it to grow, and you can actually even grow and get outside the business or outside the home. So there's so many components. And we haven't even touched on the benefits to, the actual job person, the job seeker, the person that really wants to go back to work, but really can't because they don't feel they can find or adequate childcare.
Yeah, we've got some stories on our website that talk about why people go into this field in the first place. And there is a really common kind of tension that many of these entrepreneurs start with, which is the need to earn an income and the need to care for their children. And, they're often in tension with each other. And there's one woman whose story we have talked about, kind of like feeling like she really wanted to be home with her kids, but financially it wasn't available. So, going through working in the fields, working in Mexican stores, what have you, kind of doing whatever to get by. And when she found this opportunity to actually be able to solve that tension of the ability to earn an income and to be in her home, it was, just kind of like the light bulbs went off, and this was a great opportunity. And the other thing that we noticed, like from these stories, is just how the whole family kind of gets involved. And you can imagine with a business out of your home, that's not going to work for every family for sure. But the ones who do move forward, everybody's kind of involved, everybody's helping out, everybody's like in on the childcare. And culturally, that makes a whole lot of sense for a lot of people to kind of get folks involved. One woman who went through a program, her daughter, who was an older teenager, also kind of went through the program on the side. She just took the courses, and she's going to be an assistant. So the mom is going to pay her daughter to be the assistant, and they're going to keep that income in their household. So if you think about the family's finances as a whole, all that money staying in the household. And, just to your point of the numbers of kids we can solve here. So if you have what's called a small childcare license, you can care for 6 to 8 kids of different ages. And you can go back and you can get a large family license where you can care for 12 to 14 kids. And from there, as you say, some people do then say, like, I'm going to actually start a center, a small center, and they can go back and get a different sort of license for that. It's kind of a different ballpark there, but certainly it's very transferable in terms of the skills and especially on the business side.
Well, let's focus on the small end of that first of all. So 6 to 8. If you have children of your own, do they count toward that 6 to 8, or is there an age limit when they don't count, when they're actually part of the family helping?
Yeah. So if your kids are under 10, they do count towards your capacity limits. But if they're over 13 or 13 or older, you can actually pay them to be your assistant. So summers, after school, what have you. There's no reason you can't do that. But yeah, when factoring in how much you can earn, you definitely want to take into account your own children. And that's if you've got 3 kids under 10, then your capacity is going to be, you can only care for a few more paid kids. I see a question in the chat that says, how many kids can you care for who are age 0 to 2? So the state sets up different arrangements of children depending on their age. And if you were to take you could care for 4 infants and toddlers 0 to 2. We did some modeling and we found that the most profitable combination of kids that you can have is to have 2 infants, 4 preschoolers, and 2 school age kids. So that's where you're going to make the most money. And that's a good thing to know. There are providers, however, who say, like, no, I just want to care for the little ones, or I just want to care for school age kids, or, but if you had school age kids, you could have 8 school age kids, and that's fine. The older they are, the more of them you can care for, essentially.
Yeah, a little easier when they're older. Theoretically, anyway.
Theoretically, until they become teenagers, right?
Well, some of the numbers that I've read are just kind of startling, such as in mid-February, 4.9 million people missed work because they were caring for children not in daycare.
Yep.
And then this one really shook my tree, me being an almond tree, I guess. In the US last month, there were 60,000 fewer daycare workers in the US than there was in February of 2020.
Wow.
60,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shows
And
the incredible need that you have here.
it makes sense though, right? You know, we all saw what happened during the pandemic. I was one of those people who had to quit my job so I could be a homeschool teacher, you know? I mean, it hit real close to home for me. And a lot of those people, they found work elsewhere. You know, it's, as we said, childcare is not, as a sector, is not a high wage sector. And if, you know, if you can go work at Starbucks or a burger joint or whatever, and not have the responsibility of running, of caring for children, then like, it's not going to take much for you to go to a different sector. Even for people who really love working with children, there's a financial incentive for sure. And so, yeah, and we're kind of on the other side of this pandemic. I guess it's an endemic now. But yeah, those childcares are really slow to come back. And that's kind of part of what we're doing is we want to find those folks who were in the childcare sector, who were running childcare businesses, and get them back up and running again. That's going to be a lot easier than starting from scratch. So let's get back up to zero first, and then we'll talk about taking the rest of the bite out of the problem.
Yeah, and get them up and running profitable so they see the value in actually continuing that service. And I think that some of this really comes down to an analysis. For example, if I do have 3 children at home and I'm paying for them to get childcare, and now I can keep them at home and not pay that childcare, and then actually bringing in up to 5 other additional children into the house and actually get paid for doing that. By doing that type of analysis, it can really show the value and the benefits of operating a business like this.
Yeah. And that's where we started, was we started with as a baseline, you know, wanting to see if you did this right, could you earn a self-sufficiency income? And so that was our baseline. So self-sufficiency standard is, it varies by county, it varies by age of children. And so we played around and said like, okay, well, what if you had, you know, 3 kids of these ages at home? Like, what is the point at which it makes financial sense? So for me, that was really important to make sure that this was a job that could lead to financial security for the caregivers. You know, the truth is, however, most people who are in this business, who are running childcare out of their home right now, they have no idea. They may not even know how much they're making, because their finances, their personal finances and their business finances are all mixed up together. I spoke to one woman a while back, and she's like, well, I know what my bills are. I know what I need to pay every month, and that's what I have to cover. But there was no separate business bank account from a personal bank account. It was all all just mixed up together. So part of what we're trying to help them do is to even understand how much they're earning and not earning. So we really focus a lot on, we start with like the basics of what's a budget? Why would I even want a budget? And what really baby step them through the process, introducing basic concepts. We do a lot on record keeping for tax purposes. There's also a lot of records that you have to keep for the state to be in compliance with your license. We talk a lot about marketing. We talk about a curriculum. So there are lots of others out there who we want to partner with, who are focused on the quality side of childcare. There's a lot of resources out there, but we're starting from kind of ground zero. We're starting from like, what is a curriculum? Well, a curriculum is a way to organize your day with these basic concepts so that they can move on to some of those deeper quality supports that exist in communities. We're teaching them how to set up their environment. There was one woman who said, I didn't even know what an environment was, you know, but she left the class really understanding how she could create an environment that was developmentally supportive for children. And it was also still her home. You know, it's like, it's got to meet those 2 purposes. And that's not easy to do, to think about like making your home, turning it into a business for sometimes 24-hour care. So we talk about that. And then we talk about like, putting together your plan, right? And so when they, as I said earlier in the presentation, you're getting those decisions back to you, getting that back to you in a way that's really actionable. You're making commitments. You're saying, okay, by this date, I'm going to have this kind of marketing in place. You're making commitments. We know that sort of pedagogically that when people make a pre-commitment to do something, they're much more likely to do it. So we're tapping into that kind of behavioral science knowledge that we have. And we do that sort of all the way through the process.
I got a question for you. If you are in the training, when could you start doing the application for the license? Or do you have to complete the training first?
No. So what we do is we are trying to get businesses up and running quickly. And often people get really mired in the licensing process, and it can take them months. You know, the state says it takes anywhere from 3 to 6 months. Sometimes it takes people a year to get through the licensing process. And that's not acceptable as far as I'm concerned. So we are the first 3 weeks of the 12-week session, we focus exclusively on licensing. Week number 1, they watch this required orientation by the state. Week number 2, they do all the things to submit their application, which could take people months, frankly, because you've got to go get vaccination records. You've got to go sign up for trainings. There's a lot of legwork that has to be done. But by really sequencing what people need to do, making it super clear and giving them very specific information, like, okay, you need to go get a TB test. Here are the places you can get that TB test, you know, and explaining, answering all the questions that people have right from the start, then they're able to get that administrative piece done within a week. Then week number 3, they start doing some of the independent work that they have to do to complete their license. So they've got to take about 24 hours of required health and safety, first aid, other kinds of training like that. They're doing that kind of in the background while we switch gears and start on the business side. So 3 weeks on licensing, and then the remainder of the course is on each taking a learning pathway on a particular topic. And by the end, the goal is that they would have their license and they would have completed the course at about the same time. We know that there's parts of this process that sometimes are slower. If, for example, if you've had anything in your background, even if it's been expunged, it's going to take longer to get your fingerprints cleared. We know that. That's a really bureaucratic process. And the state can be bureaucratic too. Part of what we do is really try to empower the entrepreneur to to follow up, to, you know, if the licensing agency isn't being responsive, we'll call them, you know, and if that doesn't get anything, we'll call them. And, you know, we've gone all the way up to the state level licensing and had conversations with them, confirmed the way the process is supposed to work, so that we can say with certainty to an entrepreneur, no, that's not good information that you got from wherever, and be able to really tell them what kind of experience they deserve, and help them get that experience, and ultimately expedite the whole process of starting a business.
Well, that's great, because that follow-up and that follow-through, even especially at the bureaucratic level, is so vital and important in moving that process. So one of the things that, you know, here at the SBDC, we like talking about are resources. You heard us talk about some of the resources earlier. And I'm sure that there are a lot of resources that come with operating a childcare business out of your home. Could you elaborate on a few of those?
Sure. So every county has a childcare resource and referral agency. And so that is going to be kind of your go-to place in the county that can support. They will often like review your application for you, or sometimes they'll do a pre-licensing site visit to come to your home and make sure that you've checked all the boxes. So they are that in your local place resource who you should really be connected to. The other thing that they do is that they give referrals to parents, right? So when a parent comes to them and says, I need childcare, they give them some form of a list. It might be through a database, it might be a printed list that's like, says, here's all the licensed programs. So they're a source of referrals of parents for your business. And they also often will offer the quality supports in partnership with like a county first five, for example. It looks different in different counties, but there's a lot around trauma-informed care, around kids, in the foster system. They often offer like workshops and things like that. So that's all available. Sometimes the county R&R will be able to help reimburse for some startup costs. Like sometimes they'll reimburse you for the cost of the health and safety training or the first aid training or that kind of thing. Every county is a little bit different. There were a lot of resources that came down during the pandemic that are kind of going away at the end of this fiscal year. So there's not going to be quite as much information, help financially available. But, we're working with some non-traditional partners, for example, the workforce system. So in Merced County, we are working with the Workforce Development Board there to get Nurture's training on their list of eligible training providers. And so what that means is that like people in Merced will be able to use an individual training account in order and be able to take advantage of Nurture's training. And they also have some other resources that can offset the costs of licensing expenses. So those are just a few.
Great. Again, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box. And we have time for some more questions. Yeah, when I start talking and thinking about resources, I always think about those financial resources that are needed to start any business. That level of kind of permanent working capital, like I like to call it. Is there a kind of a rule of thumb about how much is needed from a resource perspective? Because I want to try to help find it for that business here at the SBDC.
Yeah.
Is there a rule of thumb, a number that's usually needed?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. So when I started, my background is in workforce development and microenterprise, but I also worked in a childcare resource and referral agency. And I walked into that program and I said, these are businesses, who's supporting them? And the answer was no one, which was the kind of birth of this idea. And I asked my colleagues who were experts in this space, I said, well, where do they get startup capital? And the answer was kind of, well, they often have kids at home. They already have stuff that's needed. And I thought we wouldn't say that about any other kind of business, so it's just from an equity perspective of like, as you said, capital is needed to start up your business and to be successful. So we've, as part of the process of going through Nurture, entrepreneurs create a startup budget that we see on the back end, and the median was kind of around $3,000 or so. Some were more like 10, some were more like 1,000, and I think to some extent that might be, do you have young kids at home or not? But I also noticed that the budgets that people created reflected the money that was available. So they're being really creative. If they're saying like, okay, I'm expecting a $5,000 startup grant, then they're kind of going to build a budget that works to that, and if all the resources that are available are $500 to offset the cost of licensing, then they're going to have a much more conservative startup budget. So I think that $5,000 is a good number to work with. And as we get more data on what people are actually spending, we can probably fine tune that a little bit. But, if you've got that cushion of $5,000, you can buy the quality furniture instead of going to IKEA and buying something that's going to break in, 6 months or so. You can buy the quality child-sized furniture that's going to last. And kids are small, but they do take they do a number on your furniture for sure. So having that resource is really important.
Okay, well, I think we have one more question for you, and then we're out of time. So how much time and homework is required in the 12-week class? And lastly, second part of the question is, what is the average income that can be earned per month?
Sure. So the amount of time doing Nurture's coursework is anywhere from 45 minutes to 2 hours. And the people who spend 2 hours on it are the ones who are exploring every single resource, clicking every link, going down every corner, right? And so the Nurture content is pretty doable while you're doing something else. As I said, the licensing requirement is they've got to do about 24 hours of training. So mandated reporter around reporting child abuse or suspected child abuse, first aid, health and safety. So that's actually going to take more of their time than it will take them to do the Nurture specific content. So there's that. And then in terms of how much they can earn per month, what we did in our modeling is that we assumed that kids were that the entrepreneur was going to care for kids who have subsidies. So we know what that rate is because it's published information. And we say, okay, let's imagine you're caring for 8 kids using that optimal age ratio. You're fully enrolled, you're doing everything right, you're collecting every dollar. And what we found in Central California, and I modeled it for, I think I actually did Bakersfield, a few different lower cost counties, I'll say it that way, and some higher cost counties. And what we found was that annually in many places in the Central Valley, it was between $45,000 and $55,000. And then on top of that, you can do things like join the food program, which is a food cost reimbursement program that's going to add like $6,000 to your income each year. So there are ways to augment that as well. And so, so that's not an exact number per month, but it's a lot better income than you can earn in a lot of places. And you're getting this benefit of being able to be home with your kids or your grandkids. And a lot of people like working from home. I like it.
Well, Jennifer, please share your contact information. If you go back into your share screen and share that information. And I'm just going to wrap up with a couple of my tips on this. And the number one is that there's a lot of creative ways to raise some money to do this. You talked about the $1,000 grant, but there's lower rate interest rates, loans. There's some really creative ways to do this. Even if you start up and have 6 kids, is getting that first month paid in advance. So of course, nobody wants to pay in advance, but people looking for childcare right now will. And there's creative ways to do it. And then the other thing, I think that the one point that I love from your business part of your presentation was so vitally important is that it's really managing that magic number that you have, if it's 6 or if it's 8 or if it's 10, and really managing that to the maximum efficiency. I remember an old lodging guy, old hotel guy told me that every time he didn't rent a hotel room one night, it was a loss for the rest of his life, that income off of that. Yeah. And that can be applied here as well. If you have a vacancy or 2 in there, you need to get it filled up, and because that income is gone forever and you're not going to make that money back. So really, some really interesting, really dynamics that really kind of make this really fascinating.
For sure.
And
Thanks
there
so
are the questions. Again, it's going to be starting up on April the 17th. We're going to be promoting it around here quite a bit and trying to get the word out for you, because we know the value in there and we enjoy being a partner at the SBDC with Nurture and throughout the Central California region for that matter. So last comments.
Hopefully this is the beginning of a great partnership with the SBDC and with all of your listeners and watchers out there. We're starting small, but we've got really big ambitions, and we're gonna solve this crisis. But we need everyone together, everybody's resources kind of chipping in order for us to do it.
Fantastic, great program. Thank you so much for coming on this week and joining us. We're going to wrap this up. Webinar number 270. We'll be back next Wednesday for number 271. Back live then. Everybody take care. Have a great week. Goodbye, everybody.